you're doing well. Thanks everyone for coming by and checking out my last video. Again, it's doing really well. Really appreciate everyone that came by and watched and liked. I'm going to be talking about something new that I want to start, mostly for the off season. So today I'm going to be talking about Marc Andre Fleury. And I wanted to talk about just his career. So this segment that I'm going to create is going to be called A Career. And it's going to be a new playlist on my channel. So you'd be able to click it, and as I make videos and develop them, you'd be able to see it in the playlist to anyone that would want to check it out. So this would be the first of that. And just pretty straightforward and simple, that just be talking about their career and what they did and how they compare to all-time greats and what they meant to their franchise or franchises. Alright, we're going to get right into it with Marc Andre Fleury. I couldn't think of a better person who's still playing right now that would deserve a nice overview. So Marc Andre Fleury, everyone knows him. He's one of the most famous, charismatic players and that has played in a long time, and goaltender-wise, he shows the most personality, I think, of any goaltender in the whole league. And he played with the Pittsburgh Penguins between 2003 and 2017. So well over a decade he committed his life to Pittsburgh. Fleury was the first overall draft pick as a goalie, which is rare in itself, from the Cape Breton Screaming Eagles in 2003. And his nickname is The Flower. And a lot of people think it's just FL for Fleury and flower, but it actually translates over from French, being in bloom, Fleury, his last name. So that's why they call him Flower, and that's why when the French-Canadian fans, they can still call him it and mean it in French. So he played 3 seasons with Cape Breton, full seasons in the QMJHL. Cape Breton Screaming Eagles are still around today. They're a really renowned organization. They're good at getting NHL players out there. And Fleury's numbers retired there, and he said that that was probably the best situation and environment he could have had. And it was just an amazing junior team to play with. And obviously, when you're playing in Quebec, in if you're in like AAA when you're a kid, or you're playing in the minor junior leagues, you're going to be scouted and picked by the Quebec Major Junior League, just as is the same for Ontario League and the Western League. So the Pittsburgh Penguins didn't actually own this pick initially. The Florida Panthers were supposed to draft, and there were a few pieces involved, but the main pieces, it was basically the Penguins traded their 73rd overall pick and a few other picks over, and Florida was willing to send over the first overall pick, and it was when Florida was still, they didn't have a direction or anything, so they weren't maybe too hot on the first overall pick that year. Who knows what their GM was thinking at the time. But nevertheless, Pittsburgh got the first overall pick, and it wouldn't be the last time. So they went ahead, picked Fleury, and returned him to Cape Breton. He didn't play that year, but he did come up the next year and make his debut. So there was some... If you look at the Pittsburgh Penguins now, you think of them as one of the model organizations in the league of how to run a franchise. And I know like a lot of people that are fans of the Penguins might not agree with what the general manager is doing there with some of the trades, but I'm talking about it from purely a financial standpoint, because the Pittsburgh Penguins multiple times, even when you look back to when Mario Lemieux was brought into the organization, there were, if they didn't get him, they were likely going to be moved. And they were facing a similar predicament in the early 2000s, where they were talking about moving them to Nashville before, and that was also talked about before Nashville was even a franchise, but they were talking about moving them in general during a round when Fleury was picked. But Fleury was the first piece of this Pittsburgh Penguins future team. That was the main reason why they were able to stay in Pittsburgh and be a cup contender for years. And following Fleury was obviously Malkin, Letang, Crosby. They were all brought in, they all got lucky with the draft lotteries and their scouting, finding guys. They saved the Pittsburgh Penguins, these players. And Fleury, being the loyal, energetic, charismatic, happy guy he is, brought a new energy to Pittsburgh because they needed that. Like I said, he was sent down to Cape Breton that year, finished out that season, played his next year up, and he was having a good season. So this is the part about the Penguins financially. Fleury was having a good season and was on track to hit some bonuses, and he was entitled to a $3 million bonus. The Penguins could avoid paying out this bonus if they sent him back to Cape Breton. They went ahead and did it, even though Fleury decided to make it known to them that he would forfeit the $3 million. But they still returned him anyways. So that just shows what the Penguins were like. So right there was maybe the first interaction with the Pittsburgh Penguins with Fleury that maybe put a sour taste in his mouth. And you would think with anyone, you're offering to give up that much money being a rookie, and the organization does that to you. But Fleury still kept going. So he came up the next year. Throughout the next few years, the Penguins were not good, but Fleury was. He was still not given the full starter role. He was splitting time with Jean-Sébastien Aubin, and still, it didn't matter what goalie would come in. Over the next few years, Fleury was never given the reins until Sidney Crosby came. Him and Sidney Crosby developed a great relationship, and Crosby brought, again, a new energy to the forward side of the team. And from there on, it became just a totally different dynamic. And then introducing Evgeny Malkin, when they got that pick again, this team was on the rise. And they saw that this team had a swagger and something about themselves, how they carried themselves. Each one of those guys is an exceptional individual. And although Malkin's not as outspoken as Crosby and Fleury, he was still a huge part to the character of that team. There was some time in between where the Penguins, they would make the playoffs, but they would be knocked out very early. And Crosby, it took him 2 years to even get into the playoffs, but so Fleury, it took him even longer. And he didn't get his real taste of going deep into the playoffs until 2008, which everyone knows that was the year that the Penguins went to the final and lost to the Detroit Red Wings. It's very difficult to get back to the Cup final, but this team was they were so good together, the way they gelled, that it was a surprise to no one when they returned to the Cup final and faced Detroit again. And this is an opportunity that they'll never have again in the future. I'm speaking of now, because Detroit is now in the Eastern Conference. It's impossible for the Penguins and the Red Wings to meet in the Stanley Cup final. So they went back the next year, and Fleury was great. And I think a lot of people remember that finals. If everyone remembers when the Penguins won that cup, Fleury made that world-famous save on Nick Lidstrom with a second and a half left when he dove across, and just seeing that he took that risk. If Lidstrom hesitated, he possibly could have put it over top of him. But they went to Game 7. They won the Stanley Cup, their first cup with that core, and Fleury was in it for the long term. And they thought this team was going to be winning cups for years. But that never was the case. Not until they matured and grew as a team. They won that Stanley Cup surrounded by a lot of veterans around Crosby. And even though Crosby was a leader himself, they needed guys like Maxime Talbot and Pascal Dupuis, guys like that. Those were the mentors for them to grow into the players that they are today. As those players moved on to different teams, except for Dupuis, some of the veterans moved on. And they didn't have... I wouldn't chalk it up to totally leadership, but the Pittsburgh Penguins went through years where they would be absolutely fantastic. And I know there were years where Crosby had injuries, but we'll get into that when we talk about Sidney Crosby by himself. Fleury would have great regular seasons, and he would be in the Vezina conversation, and the Penguins would be looking unstoppable coming into the playoffs. Home ice advantage, everything. But from 2010 to 15, there were a couple years, notably 2012 when they lost to the Flyers, where Fleury came into the playoffs and it seemed like he forgot how to play. He had an .834 save percentage in that series against the Flyers in 6 games. Flyers won, and that's where the questions really started coming for Fleury. And every single year, everyone was saying, is Fleury getting traded? Is Fleury getting traded? But it never seemed to happen. They always would scan the market, say that there wasn't a good enough upgrade. They would trust that Fleury could turn it around, and he didn't. So they would always look back at him and say, all right, well, Fleury's going to be our starter. So he, and one of my friends can vouch for me because he is a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, and we would watch these games together, and it would baffle you because the team was so good, but then, Fleury would give up a bad rebound or would get beat on a really weak goal. And one goal that comes to mind during those years was definitely Columbus made it to the playoffs for the first time since 2009. And Fleury got beat by a practice wrister by Nick Foligno. And that was the overtime winner that tied the series. Just big momentum swings that the goalie's supposed to have not happen would lead to, even though they won that series, I don't believe they went to the final that year. I don't think that was 2016. But things like that. So everyone was wondering what was happening, but there was a guy by the name of Matt Murray coming up the next year, 2016. So, those years, Fleury lost his starting job. And in 2016, it was not given that Murray was going to start the playoffs. It was a back and forth, but they still looked at the age difference and said, all right, we'll give Fleury the job. And Fleury lost it on his own. And Murray took over, and he was watching from the sidelines, and Murray won the Stanley Cup that year as the starter. And that was really the beginning of the end. I think that was when they realized that Murray can be their goalie, and Fleury was probably on the way out. But they didn't have an answer or a really good reason to trade him other than he wasn't ready to be a backup. At that time, I don't think anyone thought he was going to be a backup. I think they just thought Pittsburgh wasn't a fit for him at the time. Maybe he was losing confidence or something like that. But 2017, Matt Murray got the start in the playoffs. He got more starts than Fleury in the regular season. Again, back-to-back Stanley Cups. And I think when you're watching that Stanley Cup celebration, watching Fleury, he was really happy for everyone, but you could see how sad he was knowing that with the Vegas Golden Knights coming in and all the rumors and seeing that he was the best goalie on the market that was unprotected, he was likely going to go to Vegas. That's exactly what happened. So, on June 21st, 2017, Marc Andre Fleury got selected in the expansion draft by the Vegas Golden Knights. And that was a sad day for Pittsburgh fans. Even though there were all the playoff losses, I think it was those Stanley Cups, those last two that they had in 16-17 that really tied this team together with the memories. Because they look back and they saw what he actually gave to them, and I think they took the blinders off and really accepted his flaws. But seeing him go and seeing the video tribute and ovation that he got when he returned to Pittsburgh, go watch that video. That is an absolute tearjerker because he's standing behind the net in tears because he's been there since 2003 and 2017. Where were you in 2003? Imagine having your life ripped apart, and not necessarily ripped apart, but just being located to a new city, Las Vegas compared to Pittsburgh, different end of the country. It's amazing. These people are humans. And sometimes people forget that, and they tried their best, and he gave everything to Pittsburgh. Now, on to his short Vegas Golden Knights career so far. He immediately, as everyone knows, Vegas found success, went on a very hot run, and we'll talk about the Vegas Golden Knights by themselves. Everyone knows that they lost to the Washington Capitals, getting 5 games. Fleury had a great playoff. But it just wasn't enough. He signed a 3-year extension right after that. He's still with the Golden Knights on that deal. He's been in the playoffs each year with them, but this is the first year where he's actually said he's willing to take the backup role of Robin Lehner. We'll go over right now his career stats, just to get an idea of how great Marc Andre Fleury is and how great he can be by the end of his career. So as of this filming of this video, Marc Andre Fleury has 466 wins and only 266 losses. So he wins twice as much as he loses. That I know a lot of people that's a result of playing on those good Pittsburgh teams. still makes you a great goaltender. Martin Brodeur, he broke records for wins in a season, but he was playing on great Devils teams. I still think that you're standing in that net, you are a great goalie. If you are any of those guys, name off those names, you're a great goalie. As of right now, has a career .913 save percentage and 61 shutouts, which is very high up on the list, and a 2.57 goals against average. So he has really good stats. He's a kind of middle of the pack save percentage, but it's not like you see in a Vezina winner's save percentage, but it's over the course of a career, and you kind of have to isolate their best years to get their best average, which is usually over like a 7-year span. So he right now is 5th all-time on wins, and next season, if he can get 30 wins, which I don't think he's going to because of Leonard, so maybe you have to spread it out a little bit more over a couple seasons, he has a very good chance to pass Ed Belfour and Roberto Luongo, and he could be 3rd all-time on the wins list. I think he's really going to do it, because beyond that, you're into the Patrick Waugh and Martin Brodeur territory, because Martin Brodeur, 691 wins, and he played his whole career at the Devils except for a little bit with the Blues, and even then he would still rack off 30 wins a season or just under. Fleury has a good chance to get 3rd, I think, by everything said and done, and even just being in the company of Patrick Waugh and Brodeur, that puts you up there. Like, there's no argument. Fleury is one of the best goaltenders of all time. And just behind him right now is Henrik Lundqvist. They're kind of in a neck-and-neck battle. They're only a couple wins apart. But I think longevity-wise and showing how they've been playing in the last few years, I would give the edge to Fleury. That Fleury is probably going to finish above Lundqvist in the end. All right, so that is my career segment on Marc Andre Fleury. Just kind of was talking with my friend who's a Pens fan and told him I'd start it off for him and do Fleury for him. So if there's anyone that you guys want to hear, I'll talk about them. I love talking about NHL players. I like talking about their careers and everything that they've done. And it's pretty fun. I have a couple other things that I'm trying to do, and I'll be trying to talk about all 3 major sports that I'll be talking about. Going to incorporate basketball a little bit over the next few videos because I could do things similar like this. Alright, so that pretty much wraps it up. I really hope you guys enjoyed this concept. I know it's maybe not like a new concept or anything, but it's really cool to do. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys have a good week, and I'll see you tomorrow.